I'll ask you to go on the Mentimeter for me. And I have basic questions about replications. So, yeah, I want to ask you, like, in an ideal world, when you open any kind of journal and you look at the issue, the different articles in that issue, um, what percentage do you expect of the articles to be replications? Could be 0 to 100. What is the replication rate that you would expect from a top tier empirical journal or just like an average journal in our field? So if you can go on the Mentimeter and just tell me, like, in an ideal world, how many in proportions should be replications? So in social psychology, which I know is not the field for most of you, but Journal of Experimental Social Psychology is considered to be an A for social psychology, for people even in management. So I want to ask you, what do you think is the percentage in Journal of Experimental Social Psychology? What do you think is the current, not the ideal, the current percentage of replications out of all of the published articles? And then I want to ask you, how many submissions, of all the submissions that have been sent to JESP, Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, how many of you do you think are replications? Finally, one last question. In terms of publishing replications, in terms of your domain, whatever it is that you see, how do you think we're doing on replications? We talked a little bit about that before, but in general, in your view, do you feel like we need more replications, we're doing okay, or we need less replications, or we're doing too many replications? So that's the final one. All right, I'm curious to see what you think about this. Let's see the results. All right. Good. So in an ideal world, you would want top tier journals to have about 31.5%, with a bit of, somebody said 100%, 100% replications. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we've got like a nice average over here. And then, even higher, it keeps jumping, 40. Even here you have like 100%. Okay. Messing around with us. So like 36 for the top tier journals and 40% for the average tier journals, whatever that may mean. You didn't even ask me like what that means, but okay. Then here, what are we going to see? In terms of right now, your estimate for a Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, without knowing that journal, just that it's a top journal in social psychology, you would estimate this at 18%. And then you think submission rate is a little bit higher, just like about the same. It's not like statistically significant difference or anything like that. How about, do we need more or less? Many of you think we need more. All right. So the gap as you see it, at least in terms of social psychology, is that right now we're about 17 to 20%, but you would like it to be double that, about 36 to 40%, right? This seems like the representation of what is happening here. I just wanted to give you, before we do our hackathon and everything else, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update from real statistics that I noticed in various places. So I just wanted to show you, it's actually really interesting to see the comparisons between you and a workshop that I gave online. So if you see this workshop that I gave, this is the percentages that they said would be an ideal world, so not too far away from yours. And these are people who came to my workshop to learn about open science. So these are already like oriented towards open science. So you seem like pretty much like same expectations in terms of the ideal world. So for every 2 novel ones, we'll have like 1 that is a replication. Their estimates are a little bit lower than yours, like 10%, but in terms of the submissions, they think, one of 3. So 3 times more submissions, 30% for JESP, which is interesting. So you can compare yourselves to others. So I just wanted to give you real statistics of how many replications we're doing. So I posted a tweet. You can go here and see, or X. What's the tweet for X? Xit. For trying to understand, so what is out there? So I know a little bit about what's happening in social psychology, but I didn't know what's happening in other fields. So I really wanted to understand psychology overall. So you come from different domains in psychology, how many replications? So the current rate, the most up-to-date one from 2023, is that the replication rate is 0.2%. 0.2%. So 169 out of 85,000 are replications. Then I asked the other fields like economics, ecology, language, special education. I just like summarized all of this here, and you can see the rates are very, very low, which is really interesting. The first one that actually did this mega study to look at the whole literature and see how many are replicated. There's this study here from 2012. That's, I think, the first one that I know of. And then they show this very disturbing kind of graph of just how many articles are published. So you can see this is exponential. So like every decade, we're really increasing the number of publications that we have. It's becoming very, very difficult for us to keep track of the literature. I don't know how you're doing on keeping track of your domain, but I have a very hard time keeping up with all the articles that are coming up. In social psychology, judgment, decision making, it's almost impossible. I've given up. So how do we choose which articles to focus on? It's interesting. But then you can also see the replication rate, which is somewhere, so somewhere like rising to get close to 2%. And this I have over there, I'll just read it to you. A more thorough analysis of 500 random selected articles revealed that only 68% of the articles using the term replication were actual replications. So some people just mention replication. So it's a little bit difficult to code those. But of all the articles, the replication rate was 1.07%. Now, I think we talked a little bit about citation rate. So what is a high citation rate? We considered all of that. I don't know what your views are, but at least with this article, what they recommended is this here. So if a publication is cited 100 times, we think it would be very strange if no attempt at a replication has been conducted or published. So to me, this is kind of like a rule of thumb. Where I try to look at the published literature and say, does it have more than 100 citations or not? And if it has more than 100 citations and I can see no direct replication, then I would try and revisit that and try to understand. But this very low replication rate is indicative of a problem where we just take things for granted, classics from the 1990s, and we just don't conduct any replications on that. You can see a bunch of other things. So this is, for example, in education. So in education, 0.13%. So number of articles keeps going up, but the percent of replications stays about the same. So this is the first thing that we talked about. You were saying in an ideal world, we'll have 30%. We see that we're very, very far from that. But you also gave an estimate of how much you think a top journal in social psychology would be. Here are real findings. So I got a tweet from Roger. Roger is the previous chief editor of Journal of Experimental Social Psychology. Actually, I gave a talk for Kent University where he's at. Unfortunately, after the talk finished, they stopped the recording, so I don't have the Q&A. And then he added a bunch of things. He came on and he shared a few things there. Roger is considered to be a very open science supportive guy. He supports replications. He has changed Journal of Experimental Social Psychology to be very high open science. So even with the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology that is considered to be very high on open science practices, this is what he says. This is his statistics. So Journal of Experimental Social Psychology 2019, 1.7, so 12 out of 670 submissions were replications. And the funny thing about this is that 6 out of the 12 were from HKU, from students that took my classes. So it means that, of all the rest, there's like 6 other submissions out there for the entire year of 2019 for one of the top journals. And it's even worse with publications, because these are just the submissions, but we have a success rate of lower than 50%. So many things get rejected. So out of the 6 that we submitted, I think 2 finally got accepted. So these are not good odds. So actually, how many are published as replications in JSP? Not many. Some of you perhaps know JPSP, so Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. 12 out of the 462 of the published manuscripts. So I don't know what you think about this, but to me, this is very disturbing. But occasionally he does go on YouTube and shares a little bit of the experiences. So I also got to see a video where he, in 2021, where he says what the rates for 2020. So 2020 was even worse than 2019. So the bottom line is, nobody is submitting replications, especially not to what is considered to be top tier journals. Then you can go and see my tweet on that and the reactions to it. So if we go back and look at what it is that you said that you expected the replications to be, it's definitely, in JESP, it's definitely not anywhere close to 20%. And our general rates are nothing close to 35 to 40%. You can make a difference. So I'm going to give you an example, because this is what we're going to do together, not today. Today we're going to do a preview to what we do with the replication. So today we're not going to complete the whole replication, but I wanted to show you that it's possible to do a replication within 2 days. And the first time that I tested this was in 2019. So basically I got together with this team in Sweden. I went over there and they asked me, so what are you going to do? Are you going to come and give some talks? Going to give us some tools? And then I said, I think we should just do things together, like a hackathon, a little bit like we're trying to do here today. So I did something very ambitious. I said, I'll come on the 26th, 27th, we'll collect data, and the 28th, we'll analyze the data together. It was very ambitious, wasn't sure that this is going to work out, but everything worked out terrific. So I don't know what your feeling is about what happened last week, but I think you were able to see that within 3 hours, we were able to take a template of a Qualtrics and do a basic design, have a Google Doc, work on this together. A lot of interesting things came out. When I looked at the stuff that you produced in these 3 hours, I thought that was brilliant. So the basic idea that I had back then, and also the idea that I want to implement here with you, is that we had a very simple vignette study. The materials are available. I wanted something that was very quick to run, that everybody would be able to interpret, with a very simple manipulation. That's something that we can run online on mTurk, Cloud Research, or Prolific. Fast, easy IRB. So I don't know how you do your IRBs, but with replications, it's much easier. Let me tell you how I do this with HKU. I do this once a year. I refresh my ethics request. And basically what I say is, if it's a vignette study, if it's no harm, if I can run this online or with HKU students, and if it's a replication, then no need to go through another IRB. So basically I put targets that I want to do that year together in one place, and I ask for an approval for all of these together. That makes it a lot simpler. So all the thesis students that work with me don't need specific ethics approval. They just need an ethics waiver based on the approval that I already received. So just saves a lot of time. Similar with this here, no harm possible to participants, vignette study, very easy to run, simple manipulation, no deception, all of that. So already covered by the IRB that I do annually, with a very, very simple methodology. So the target that we wanted to do was this target: are we all less risky and more skillful than our fellow drivers? I just wanted to show you what this article is, because some of you might think it's very difficult to publish and it's very difficult to do a replication. It's really not. This is the article. Now, you might think this is not the whole article. No, this is the article. So this is the methods section. This is the only thing that's in the methods. This is what's in the results. This is the article. Actually, if you go and you read in Science and Nature, many of them are like 3 pages. It just doesn't have very much. How about statistics? Where are the statistics here? Nothing. There's no statistics here. Very, very simple. What does it do? Are we all less risky and more skillful than our fellow drivers? Subjects were asked about their competence as drivers in relation to a group of drivers. So compare yourselves to other drivers. Who do you think is more risky? Who do you think is more competent? Who do you think is driving more safely? With a very simple hypothesis that all of us, on average, think that we're better drivers than others. So this was the beginning of what was later referred to as better than average effect. Not just with driving, but also with many other things. We always think that we are better than others. So, for example, this is what they wrote for their Swedish participants. We would like to know how you think about how safely you drive an automobile. All drivers are not equally safe drivers. We want you to compare your own skill. And that was basically it. And then the results don't even have like p-values or anything else. The medians for the distributions of safety judgments are provided in table 1, and then about 81 to 90% of the drivers think that they're better than other drivers. Simple. What do you think about this article? Any thoughts? It's like, who would even be interested in replicating this kind of article? Like, why would this even be like a thing that you want to do? Does this have any value, right? So if you go and look at this in Google Scholar, you'll see that it has almost 3,000 citations. So this is a very, very impactful kind of research because it started an entire literature. So with a very simple demonstration, a little bit like the Tversky-Kahneman prospect theory, heuristics and biases kind of thing, just by a very simple demonstration, it has a lot of citations that came out of there. So I was very curious to see whether there were direct replications of this work, and turns out that there were none. Which is very curious. Why haven't we revisited this? And it's such a simple methodology. So I thought, the very least, we can go and give this very simple question to others to see how they would react to this, and then summarize this. First, you can do descriptives, but we can also, in the past 40 years, various methodological advancements came out. So maybe we can add a little bit more to that. So there is value in this because this is a very impactful paper. So if you want to start with replications, I suggest you go to the literature, look back at the 1970s and 80s, and look for these kinds of articles to assess whether you can find something before everything became so complicated, before we had all these advanced methods. But we wanted a little bit more than that. We thought, okay, it's an impactful paper, let's revisit this. But I wanted to do a bit more to try and go beyond that. And here, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is, first, I want you to know that you can do replications because it's needed. Nobody else is doing this. Rather than 30%, we have 0.2%. So there's much need for your replications. Another thing is that through replications, you can have advancements in methodology, in theory, in measurement, in design. So I'll tell you what we did. So when we tried to replicate this, we actually found something very curious. So we looked at the scale that they had over there, and this was the scale. They had 2 DVs, safety and skill. So how you compare to others, how do you think you are in terms of safety? And then percentile. And then when we looked at their scale, so they had these 11 points, you'll see that they had 0 to 10 is like one category, 11 to 20, another category, 21 to 30, and then 41 to 50. What is the problem with this scale? It's a very odd scale. Why? Because 0 to 10 actually has 11 values, right? This has 10 values, 10 values. Yeah, so this one here has 11 values, and the midpoint is actually not very well aligned. So what we decided to do is try to correct this. So if you find a flaw, sometimes you revisit these classics and you find a flaw, and then you can just make it better. So this is what we suggested to do instead. So the original is the one here on the top. And then we said, okay, we'll fix it. How to fix it? If you really have 11 points, just have like 5 on one side, 5 on the other side, and then 50 as a midpoint. But that's also a little bit problematic. So whenever you have 0 to 100 and you try to transfer it to 11 points scale, it's a bit tricky. So we thought, so is it going to be different if we change it to like a more proper scale? And then finally we said, like, why do we even need like percentile? Let's just do a Likert scale. So just like have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is the midpoint. 7 is much better. 1 is like a lot worse. And then just do that, right? So here's an example of how with a replication, you can fix something in the original and then see, does it really matter? Do people really deviate in the way that they respond to this? So you can see the results here. The original scale had a very strong effect. So this is a Cohen's d of 1.7 or so. Didn't really matter that we changed the scale, the midpoint. It was about the same. But when we did a Likert scale, the effect was a little bit lower than that. And it had effects for both safety and skills. So basically, we were able to replicate this and extend this and have some valuable extensions, insightful extensions added to this. So this is what the email that I wrote to them. So I collected data, shared the results with them, and then we wrote it up together. And the conclusion was that this is a very successful and robust finding. But the main question is this publishable? Can you really get this published somewhere? So I didn't know back in 2019, but we decided to just give it to a new journal that just opened up called Meta Psychology. And this is what eventually happened. In order to submit us to Meta Psychology, it's a new journal that does things on preprints. So we had to preprint this. And then the peer review is posted on the preprint. I don't know if you're familiar with this extension called Hypothesis, but you can go online to basically any website or article and comment on it directly. So this is how they do their peer review. It's kind of interesting. Just a little bit about this top factor, which meta-psychology is the highest on the top factors. And I think I showed it before on citation standards, data transparency, research material transparency, and all of that. It's really the top. So if you want to know more about how to do open science well, you'll see that meta-psychology, I think now it also matches with another journal that came up. So it's very high on that. This is why we decided to send it over there. And finally, it took a while. It was pandemic and everything, but finally it did get published. Now I wanted to show you just what it looks like to have very high transparency on this. You'll see that you have who it was reviewed by. So it has open peer review and it's identifiable. So I know exactly who said what. And interesting is that if you see reviewed by, so these two folks, Lucas, 2 years later, is now part of our team, and now we're collaborating on other things. So initially, he didn't know much about me, I didn't know much about him, but because of this review and how much he just contributed to helping us do better, now he's helping us like code everything that we're doing with the core team. And another very interesting thing that we still don't have in other journals is this analysis reproduced by. Okay, so I just wanted to say that we submit everything, and then there's a person who is dedicated to verifying our code and making sure that what appears in the code actually matches everything in the manuscript. So this is an amazing kind of service to you to make sure that you don't have any errors. What other journals do you know that go over your code and validate everything? No, I don't know many. It's very rare. So we love this kind of service by them. And this is what it looks like. So they take everything from the peer review. You can see all the peer reviews from Lucas. So all the peer reviews shared, how we responded to the peer review, all the cover letters, everything is on. They do this. I didn't do this. They did everything for us. So very high transparency. So we did this a couple of times with other publications as well. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you this case study to say open science pre-registered replications and extensions could be valuable. You can add extensions that add to theory, measurements, whatever it is that you feel like. You can choose something that's very, very simple, that is even just like descriptives, revisit this, and even get this published at the end. So if you're feeling like perhaps everything just seems like too much, everybody is expecting you to publish in Science and Nature, there's a different way to go about this thing. And you can even get this done within a couple of days, done well. Yeah, okay, so we'll skip this. Any questions about this? If not, we'll talk about our target article. Anybody want to summarize this for us to tell us what this article is about? What is it about? What are we trying to do over there? What's the experimental design? What's the research question? Yes, please. Thank you.
Citizens willingness to pay at different levels of saving wildlife. Well, in because the study was saving wildlife, it was more about, I forgot what the word was, something value.
Yeah.
Contingent value.
Right. So if you would have to like frame what the purpose of this article for them, not for us, for them, what is it that they were aiming to do?
If I remember correctly, it was to see like how much money they should but like how much money they should use for, I forgot.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's some public, like it wasn't an oil spill.
There was also an oil spill, right? So they had like two things.
There was background like for because of it, like did this all start because of the oil spill?
Yeah, good. Yes. So we wanted to know how much, back then environment was less of an issue. I think one of the big things that were happening, there was a hole in the ozone. That was one big thing that people had to worry about. And then there were all oil spills. And then we wanted to know how much we should do in order to protect migrating birds, and what should we do about oil spills? Should we invest money? Do people want to invest money in this, this kind of thing? And let's say that the government doesn't take care of this, how much people are willing to like give out of their own pocket, either taxes or as donations in order to save all sorts of things from that. Yeah, terrific. Yes, one more thing.
I think on a more meta level, it was also a critique on the methodology that was used at the time to measure valuation and therefore willingness to pay. Specifically, they had 3 different hypotheses pertaining to theoretical validity, convergent validity, and reliability, and trying to see how, in actuality, a lot of the results all of the results violated those very basic assumptions about, for example, how questions were being asked.
Right.
Dichotomous versus open-ended, and how respondents were very likely to change the way that they would respond based on how the question's being asked.
Yeah, terrific. So I think this is the core of what the authors wanted to do. So there was a bunch of other things about what's happening with oil spills, what's happening with birds, but I think they were concerned about the methodology. So they just wanted to contrast different types of methodology to see how this affects the way that people react. So we can be honest. Can we be honest about this article? It's a boring article. Can we say this? I was really hoping you would say this. Like, why is it so hard to say that this is a boring article? So next time I ask you, I'm asking you now, how do you feel about this article? Yeah, thank you. Why is it boring?
Still different jargons.
Jargon, yeah. What the hell with the jargon thing? What else? What else is boring about this? This is a really good example of how not to write an article, right? Right? Well, what else is the problem about this article? It's very long. You could have made your point in a much easier, more concise way of doing this. Very dull kind of things. It's focused on methodology. It's like, who cares about this, right? As long as you get your data out, you ask them questions, see some funky effects. That's the only thing that we care about, right? Good. So I think it's important that when I ask you, like, how do you feel about an article, that you say how you feel about it. I feel like it's okay for us to express all kinds of a range of feelings about an article. This was very difficult for me to finish. So I'm sure all of you read every word and dug into everything in great detail. I did not. I went through this article maybe 20 times already. I could never get past the first page. It is so dull. It's just like, I don't know who writes this way. However, why are we focusing on this? Did I choose this article? Do you know? What could be possibly the reason for me to do this, other than to torture you? Which is, I have to admit, like a big pleasure of mine, but that's not the main reason. Why would I assign this article to you? Why would I want to do a replication of this? Any thoughts?
Maybe expected replication rate is high.
Okay, yeah, so you've learned something about me, right? I like to aim for high replicability. Yeah, okay. Is there anything in this article that would suggest to you that replicability is high? Yeah, please.
I would say your personal interests in effective altruism.
Yeah.
So effective altruism is essentially about maximizing utility from, for example, your donations, which is what we see with GiveWell, with GiveWell.
Right.
And specifically, this article shows that, well, compassion fade, given that just because the number of, for example, birds that need saving, it doesn't mean that people will necessarily pay more.
Right.
So I'd say personal interest in altruistic.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So that's another analysis of me. Yeah, I'm very curious about donating to save lives. I gave you a Slack message inviting you to come to a talk by undergraduate thesis student, Manix, who did this wonderful effective altruism thesis with me. And based on that, actually, we're doing all of the undergrads in my courses, Advanced Social Psychology 3052, are doing something very similar to Manix. So basically, we're trying to see how to understand charitable giving. How do people donate? When do they donate? And then later, I'll make an announcement about this. You don't feel obligated or anything. But I'll also give a talk to this group called Effective Altruism Hong Kong. No researchers over there. These are like practitioners, people who run charities, do a bunch of good around the Asia region. So if you want to come and get to know them and also hear about what I've been doing with the undergraduates, you're welcome to come at the end of November. So I'll make an announcement here. Feel free to ignore this. But it is related to a line of research, which is really interesting, this thing about high replicability. I had some assumptions with this literature, and many of these assumptions have been violated. So I'll tell you one of the classic studies. So this is a classic study about an effect called the identifiable victim effect, which has become, I think almost every time a charity wants to extort money from you, manipulate you to donating more, what do? There's this beautiful little girl from Africa, surrounded by poverty. She's really suffering. She really needs your help. You don't see a million little girls. You don't see, big numbers. Usually it focuses on this one personal story. And what is really interesting is one of the first studies on this was this one. This is like a very clear demonstration where we had between subject design. So you saw either the top or the bottom conditions. And this is my version that I ran with students at HKU in 2019. And I was sure that I'm going to replicate this because this seemed very intuitive to me. So given a middle-class Hong Kong student status, assuming that this is, I don't know, HKU population, how much money would you be willing to donate to save Rokia? And the other condition saw actually two, Rokia and Musa together. So how much would you be willing to donate to Rokia and Musa? Did we talk about this before? No, first time? Okay. So what possible hypotheses can we have about this between subject design? People see either this one or this one. What might happen? What possibilities do we have?
It would be less, the same, or more.
Or more, right. Let's talk about more. What is more than what? So the most rational thing, let's say that we're economists and we see the world as completely rational. All of us are machines, right? And we have an unlimited capacity to give, right? How would we approach this kind of thing? What would we do? We have one person versus two persons. How much would we give to the two versus the one? We would double, right? We'd say, okay, Rokia probably needs whatever amount. Rokia and Musa probably need double than that, right? You might make some assumptions about, I don't know, maybe a male and female. You can like play with this, but this is like an assumption. What other possibilities are there about more? So two higher than one. What could be another possibility that's not double? It could be the same, but before we get to the same, we're still focusing on the more. So two is more than one, but we say it's not double. What else can it be? Sorry?
One more. Like if you have one picture,
Yeah.
and then having two.
Okay, yeah. So we have two double than one. We have same. Sorry? Yeah, okay, good. So we have two double than one. We have less than double. So one is X, and then two is not 2X, but let's say 1.5X. Why? Because it's like exponential in our ability to absorb all these little girls and thinking about what's happening in Africa and all this. It diminishes over time, right? Could be. And then we have same, and then we have less, right? Let's talk about same. What would be a reason for this to be the same between the two conditions? Why would that happen? So we have the Homo economicus rational double. We have a little bit less saying, okay, people just like adjust their capacity to donate based on the number of people. So it diminishes like over time. Why would it be the same? You only have so much to give, right? So you give the maximum that you can. And that's a really good hypothesis for that. Thank you. Why do you think it would be less? What would be a rational way to explain less?
Maybe when you see one person, you feel stronger personal connection.
Mhm.
But you see two, it's just like, oh. Like maybe it's like not, maybe not two, maybe like a whole group.
Yeah.
You feel less personal about it. But
Yeah.
it's mostly compared to one where you feel like a one-on-one connection.
Right. Yes. Good. So this is what they were trying to claim. This is their theory, exactly what you said. We have only so much emotional capacity. And then when we have two of them, something happens to us where it kind of like fades away between these two. What can we do here in order to understand this a little bit more? We can also add like a third condition. In the third condition, we can have 3 different children. We can have another condition. We can have 4 children. We can have another condition, have 5. And then just see like what happens over those, right? And then see, does this keep declining or does it really double and triple and quad, all the way? So a very interesting thing to do. Some people have done this. So this is what later was called the compassion fade. And then we have this article. So this article was actually from 2014, so fairly recent. But then when I tried to see where this whole thing started from, I went back. And then suddenly the furthest back that I can go is our article here. this very boring, dull article, which compared 20,000 to 2,000. And then they also had the third category, 200,000, right? So they showed something similar in that article. So of all the hypotheses that we had, they were expecting people to be willing to donate. The more birds that you have, more people, the more people will be willing to. This is what they found. So they had three conditions because they also wanted to control for gender differences. So they wanted to know how much would you donate to Rokia, how much would you donate to Musa, how much would you donate to both of them. So they measured both affect and donations, and this is what they showed. So for Rokia, this is Swedish money, so I don't know how to translate this to Hong Kong dollars, but for Rokia, 25, for Musa, 25, Rokia and Musa, 21.5, so less, significantly less for two than for one, both in affect and in donations. So classic study, I don't know if you recognize some of these names, but Paul Slovic, big name in psychology. If you've taken any courses in introduction to psychology, Paul Slovic keeps coming up. Ellen Peters talks about numeracy and other things in judgment decision making. She just gave the keynote in Spudem, judgment decision making. And Daniel is the same Daniel from this one, who I visited in Sweden in order to run this replication. So that's another reason why I wanted you to see this replication. He is the one who invited me to Sweden in order to run this other driving replication. So because he's supportive of open science and all of that, and even Ellen Peters, when I met her in the conference, I came to her and I said, do you know that we were running a bunch of replications? And not only did she say yes, but she remembered the email that I sent her like 4 years ago asking for some materials. So interesting bunch, good scholars, care about open science, very supportive of replications. So I ran this in HKU. These are the results. What I did was contrast both Rokia and Musa, and birds. So what I did was like I had Rokia and Musa, I had 2,000 birds, and then instead of 20,000 and 200,000, I just said 2 million birds. And what you can see here, this is in Hong Kong dollars. So you can see with a sample of 53 HKU undergraduates, Rokia received 308 Hong Kong dollars, Rokia and Musa 250. Comparing people to birds, 2,000 birds is like 175, and then 2 million birds is 110. What's your interpretation of this? What do you think?
Rokia is more important.
Yeah, people are more important than birds. So one Rokia is higher than Rokia and Musa. That's already interesting. And then both of them are higher category than birds, but then 1,000 birds is much higher than 1 million birds. Does this replicate the target article that we read? What are the findings in target article that we had? Seems like no differences, right? Between 2,000, 20,000, 200,000, no differences. But it seems like here, with the HKU student, there was an effect. So I was very optimistic about this. So saying, okay, I have high prior, this is going to replicate. I'm going to run this officially as a replication and see what happens. I also tried to do some prediction markets. So I asked a different group to try and predict what HKU students would say. So this is what they predicted. So they were wrong about this. So they thought a female is higher than a male, but then both of them together is higher, but also like a diminishing, not like double, but like diminishing. This is the predictions that they had, but obviously they failed on that. But then this, like 2 months ago, I visited Norway. I ran the same kind of workshop that I did in Sweden. And I ran the Rokia versus Musa. I wanted to see if this would replicate with a real sample. So we ran like 515. And I thought that maybe there would be like HKU students, but look what happened. It's a little bit frustrating, isn't it? So Rokia here, donation, this is in US dollars, somewhere like 3. Musa, about the same. And Rokia and Musa, about the same. Out of curiosity, you haven't, like you read the methodological boring thing in the Target article, but what kind of questions do you have about this? So when we study something like donations, what kind of things would you want to ask in order to know whether this is solid, not solid, what happens? There's a bunch of questions that should come up here, right? So if we want to know how people are dealing with mental accounting, is this emergency, not emergency? When you run this online, how would you get people online or HKU students to donate? What did I ask Hong Kong students? Given an average HKU student salary, middle class, like how much would you donate, right? Is this donation? Ask yourself whether the DV actually captures what it is that you want to measure, right? So what is this DV? What is this one? This question. What does this question capture? Willingness, yeah?
The online sample was from MTurk.
MTurk, yeah? Yeah, so let's say I want to improve on this. I really want to understand whether HKU students will donate or not donate. What should you do? Yes?
If you're sounding.
Hypothetically, or like in what way? Let's try and frame this as a question or a scenario. What would happen? How would you ask this?
Like, is the entire sample for HPD students?
Mhm.
Make sure that all HPD students.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
So let's say I'm running this in participant pool.
Mhm.
Yeah. What would I do in order to measure donations?
Just ask how much money would you be willing to donate?
Yeah.
Like, skip the first clause. Just ask how much.
Yeah. So you, not given you specifically, how much you would donate. So the poor students, completely exhausted and stressed out by all their studies, come to my study because they have to get credit for participant pool. And then I ask them, how much now are you willing to take out of your pocket in order to give me so I can donate this to Rokia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one way of doing this. What are the concerns? What are the possible challenges with this?
Maybe we'll just pick a random number.
No. Okay, yeah, random number. Yeah, but like, imagine yourself being in this participant pool. You came to get some credits. Now this professor is asking you to open your wallet and give to Rokia.
Oh, no, not.
Oh, not like that.
No. Like,
Hypothetical. Yeah. Yeah. Right, but then we have the same kind of concern of whether this really translates to donation, right? Is this really measuring? So this is a good first step about willingness, about intent. Very good, right? But let's say that we want to get closer to really know whether people are going to donate or not. What would you do?
Students to class,
Mhm.
give them $10
Mhm.
and ask how much money would you be willing to donate right now?
Out of the 10 that you just received, or in general?
Out of in general.
In general, here's a gift, 10 Hong Kong dollars for you. No questions asked. Now, completely unrelated to this, how much? Yeah, these are good questions. So with donations, it's tricky, right? Because if they don't have money, and HKU students really are very, cheap about these things, right? So asking them to just open their wallets, especially if they come to our participant pool, they need the credits, they want to finish this as fast as possible, they usually would not open their wallets to really donate. So we need to give them something. So maybe they'll donate out of that. So giving them 10 Hong Kong dollars is already a good idea. Very good. So it's a good question to ask, how did we do this? But basically what we told participants is that we'll give them a bonus of $5, really no questions asked. And then we said, out of the bonus, out of this unexpected money, how much would you be willing to donate? And we gave this in jumps of 1. So like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the whole 5, right? So The reason why this is needed is because with mTurk, they're not going to, there's actually no way for me to charge them, right? There's no way, please donate here. They wouldn't do this. So I can just say, I'm going to pay you an additional bonus that you're not expecting. Out of that, I just want to know how much you'll be willing to donate to save Rakia, who really needs this. What are the problems with this? Any problems that you see with this? Yes, please.
That student would give them like a bad impression if they say, "Oh, I want to keep it," so they would just say, "Donate it all."
Yeah, so there's definitely a little bit of like impression management, especially if you like see them in person, they see you, right? Maybe not so much with mTurkers. They don't see you, they're halfway across the world, they really care about, but there is something about demand effects or the way that they feel like they're maybe under pressure. I don't know if you've seen this, but in the ethics form, we need to indicate whether there are some potential problems. And actually, when we run things on participant pool, we need to acknowledge whether it's going to be face-to-face. And if it's face-to-face, we have to write in there that there is the possibility that because they know me, they will try to appease me in some unforeseeable and unethical way. So we need to address this in some way. Very good point about what happens face-to-face. Any other issues that might happen? Yes, please.
What's in their wallet, so they didn't become part of their deposit.
Right.
If you do this research, like 2 or 3 days later, money became their part of their deposit.
Yeah.
Result.
Yeah, I have not really given them that money, right? It's kind of like, it's still like hypothetical money. It's like, I pretend that I gave this to you. How much are you going to give me back? And then I give them the difference, right? So maybe like an even stronger design is first give it to them and then see how much they're willing to do. But yeah, mental accounting wise, they might separate the two occasions saying, okay, this is already ours. Now it's like a completely different study, therefore not going to donate anything. And if you ran anything on Amazon Mechanical Turk or Prolific, these are very clever souls that do participate in studies for a living. They've seen like 1 million of these things and they know very well what's happening. So whenever you try this kind of manipulation and setup, they're very clever about this. And they're like, we do funneling. So I really recommend that all of you have a question of, so what is the research question? What do you think we're doing here? And all of them are just like, yeah, you want to see how much I am. So they're able to kind of like deduce our hypothesis in some way. So could be that we're just like not seeing differences because people are just like giving their maximum, or they're a little bit ambivalent about the differences, but yeah, weren't able to do that. So here, in the time that we have remaining, we're going to try and do a little bit of this scope, neglect, compassion, fade replication. We won't be running the replications yet because I have a different request from you. Oh, I just wanted to tell you one last thing, is that the article that you read, which is a very dull and boring article and also in a format of the 1990s, looks a little bit like this. So these are the findings that they had. 2,000 birds, 59, 20,000 birds, 59, 200,000, 71. So just like a little bit. And then when you look at these differences, you don't really have like significant differences. Actually, this is a good point for us to discuss because this is another thing about methods. When you see this kind of, so we have this table here and we see the p-value and we have 2,000 lower than 20,000, p-value is higher than 0.05, 20,000 less than 200,000. So all of them are higher than 0.05. What can we conclude here? What can we say? What is our bottom line? So a lot of people, especially up until, 5-10 years ago, would say, we didn't find p-value lower than 0.05, therefore we found support that there are no differences. What is the problem with this? This is a null hypothesis. We failed to reject the null hypothesis, but failing to reject the null hypothesis is not support for the null hypothesis. I hope we all understand the differences. Yeah? So what's interesting here is that we need to be very, very careful with the null hypothesis. When we have a null hypothesis, how do we address this problem? Let's say that we understood that there are no differences here. And now I'm doing a replication and I'm expecting no differences. How to test this? Statistically, how to test? Sorry? Bayesian, yeah, how to do this? What's happening with Bayesian and null hypothesis? Do you know?
The strength of the non-evidence. Like
The strength of?
how much evidence is for the non-evidence.
Right, yeah. Good. How many of you have experience with ran Bayesian analysis before? A couple, yeah? Yeah, so good. Bayesian analysis do a bunch of things. One of the magic things that they do is that they allow you to quantify support for both the alternative and for the null hypothesis. So you're able to see how much more likely is the null hypothesis over the alternative hypothesis, right? So whenever you have this kind of thing and you want to test support for the null hypothesis, you would need to use Bayesian. Good, thank you. If I want to null hypothesis significance testing and p-values, how would they do this here? Are you familiar with any method that would allow us to do this? No? Have you heard of equivalence testing? Have you ever done equivalence testing? Do you know what that is? No? Okay. So equivalence testing, instead of doing null hypothesis significance testing against the null, against the zero, against no effect, the equivalence testing says you test this against an effect. So if the minimum effect that you expect to be meaningful is 0.2, you can compare whether this is smaller than 0.2. If you find that it's smaller than 0.2, then you say, we found support for the null hypothesis. So I'll show you a demonstration of what equivalence testing looks like. But in this case, and this is actually very, very important and different from other things, when we expect no differences, traditional null hypothesis significance testing with p-values cannot be used, either Bayesian or equivalence testing. Okay, so keep that in mind. We'll talk a little bit about that later. They also had the oil spills, so the small ones, 129, and all spills together, 81. Interesting. I also found an updated book. They just released the book again, and it looks better. It has better tables and a little bit. So if you want, you can like click on the top over here to see the updated book. The problem with this is that the first time that I was looking at this article, like 3 years ago, it had a citation rate, I don't know, it's like 500, 600, 700, something like that. But now that they've updated the book, there's no more links to the other articles. So like disappeared and like plummeted back to, I think, 200 citations. So Google Scholar is doing some very, very weird stuff, but I was able to discover this new version of the book that came out explaining what it is that they've done with much nicer figures. So it seems like they spent some time to refresh things. Okay. To summarize this target article, we have number of lives. In this case, it's like birds, number of birds saved, oil spill, small or big. We have response types, so the methodological thing about dichotomous versus open-ended versus, I don't know, continuous. I can't remember exactly what they had in there. Got bored after the first page. And we can measure like other things as well. I'll just tell you the outline of our hackathon for today. I'm going to call this Many Designers. So there's this trend right now in psychological science, in meta science, that is trying to get a bunch of people to research the same research question and design their own experiment. So I'm not asking you to do a replication. I don't want you to follow what the target article did. I want you to design the best study that you can in order to measure the way that people react to a number of birds in terms of donations. For those who are here and already want to like have a look at things, you're welcome to just like open this, find your team, and then just look at the outline to see. So there's a section about research question, hypotheses, experimental design, data analysis plan, and Qualtrics. I don't know how much time we'll have to go through all of that, but we will try as much as possible to minimize time, to optimize time with the team effort. We'll just wait 2 more minutes and then I'll walk you through this. So we don't have much time, so I'm gonna walk you through this. Let's open the hackathon now where you have permissions, all of you are editors. So I'll walk you through this. Our aim is to get your groups to an optimal efficiency of working together in order to produce an output within 1 hour, okay? What we aim to do here, now that you know what the study is to completely forget what the study is and do your own. So we have a research question. I want your team to come with an experimental design that would test this. So you can decide what kind of an IV, what kind of a DV. The only thing that you have is a research question. It's up to you to design this, right? You can even play a little bit with the research question. I wrote something very, very fast. I don't even know if this represents the target article very well, but this is the research question that I gave you. When aiming to donate to save birds, do or how do people adjust behavior based on the number of birds, right? So in the design that you saw in the articles, they had 2,000, 20,000, 200,000. I leave it up to you if you want to test this. But I want you to come up with the strongest experimental design possible, right? So we'll compare a little bit. We'll do some peer review on each other. We'll do all that kind of thing. And as a group, I want you, each team member, to be responsible of one part. So after you have like a 5-minute, 10-minute discussion, I want all of you to be assigned to different parts of the Google Doc and then work together in order to complete this at maximum efficiency, okay? So given that this is the research question, one of you should write the hypotheses. What are the hypotheses? And I give you all sorts of things about how to write hypotheses. Some people think, oh, writing hypotheses is very, very simple. It's not, because you need to be very precise and you need to make the hypotheses testable and falsifiable. So I give you some things. So for example, they need to be directional. It needs to be clear which direction this is. It needs to be very precise about which condition is higher than what condition. So at the end, you should have this kind of thing, which IV, which DV, and what the prediction is. And it should be written very, very concisely and accurately. Then we have an experimental design. So you can decide which conditions you want. I would say aim for like 3 conditions. You can decide which of these conditions. What DVs do you want? How to measure these DVs? And think about this, that this is donations. So how do you want this? Do you want to give them 10 Hong Kong dollars and ask them how much they want to give out of that? Do you want to do this in 2 phases, like was suggested here? Do you want to do this hypothetical, like we discussed here? So up to you to come with the optimal design of how to do this kind of experiment. So you can add DVs. You can also have manipulation checks or comprehension checks or attention checks, or add whatever open-ended question if you want to have that. So you think what best fits your design, what it is that you're trying to do. Then one of you will do data analysis plan. So here I'm asking you to do, and of course the data analysis should be testing the hypotheses. So once we have the hypothesis, is that which hypothesis are you testing? What is the independent variable? What is the dependent variable? Which test? And you need to be very specific. Just saying t-test is not enough. You need to do a Welsh independent t-test, independent sample. So be very, very accurate about what it is. What alpha? Are you aiming for 0.05? Perhaps you want to do lower than that. Do you need to compensate for anything? Yes or no? So any adjustments? If you plan to do some kind of outlier, I don't know what, you think about it, add it here. Exclusions, do you want to exclude anybody? Yes or no? Add this here and have, I don't know, 2 or 3 main tests that would test your hypothesis. For every hypothesis should be at least one test. And finally, at the end, I would want you to come up with a very basic Qualtrics. So one of you that has the access to Qualtrics. I think for all of you, there was like one person here somewhere that had like the access. Doesn't have to be this person. I'm just saying, go start designing the Qualtrics. So if you have 3 conditions, have 3 blocks. I have all sorts of guidance to say, you know, have meaningful block names, update your team name in the block name, etc., etc. And then I give you some instructions on how to simulate data and how to run the tests that your group wrote in the data analysis plan. Is this clear? Are you up for it? I'm very curious to see whether there's going to be differences between the teams. Are you going to come up with something similar, different? What's going to happen? And then we'll try to do some peer review depending on how much time we'll have. But at the end, I'll go through all of these and give you some feedback so that you can learn from that to see how you are with designing experiments on specific research questions. So you can completely ignore the target article, or you can build on that. It's completely up to you. Okay? So what I suggest, sit with your team, talk about this for 5-10 minutes, make sure that you're all on track, that you know which hypothesis, assign the different roles, and then work together, each person in their own domain, and make sure that you're always synced. Any questions before we begin? Okay, so we'll give this an hour. If you need like a break in between, like 5 minutes, go ahead and do that. But you can start working. So just make sure that, just like last week, we have team red, purple, gray. Just make sure that you're working on your section. If there's anything that you need from me, just raise your hand. I'll come to you, and then we can discuss this together. Okay? So make sure that you're with your team, get together, talk this through, and get started. One last thing, if there's something that you don't know how to do and you need some help, please let me know. It's completely okay. I don't expect you to know all the details about all of the stages. Just let me know. We did extensions last week. This is not about extension. This is about, you have a very specific research question. How to test this specific research question. What is the best design for that? No need to start thinking about extensions and predictors and another. It's like, given this research question, what is the best design in order to test that? Okay? Are we on the same page? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so time is limited, so hopefully by now you've discussed the general design. Now I suggest that you allocate the different sections and start working on this. So each person has a different section, so try and work on those as you coordinate. So try to optimize, try to make things more efficient. Okay, we're about halfway through. I hope now you have like a good understanding of what you want to do, what it was going to look like. Hope you're feeling good about things. Maybe start to like wrap up. Okay, last 5 minutes for you to wrap up, and then we'll make a discussion. It's okay that you haven't completed everything. It's mostly to get you to think about things. Don't worry. Do as much as you can for the next 5 minutes. Try and wrap up. I want us to like spend the last 10 minutes to contemplate a little bit about what we did here. I saw some things, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think you don't very often get to first sit together with others and hack through a design. I think it's a very valuable experience. The first time that I did this, I was just amazed on all the things that I couldn't see, that some others had much simpler solutions for. So like, I'm stuck on one thing, and then somebody else from the team is like, yeah, but we can just do that. So sometimes just exchanging ideas is something that could really help you move forward. So the team, the collaboration can really get you to do amazing things in a very short time. You might be thinking, but we haven't finished much. There's so many other things that we need to do. But go and have a look at what you've done in 1 hour. It's pretty amazing. So first, working together with a team, thinking together, brainstorming, separating the roles, having everybody work together. There's something very powerful in that, and I wanted you to experience that. Second thing is, I don't know how often you have the experience of working on something and having access to an instructor or a PI to be able to ask questions. Sometimes you're feeling very, very stuck, and all you need is for somebody to come and give you some clarity. Sometimes you're feeling, you want to do a lot. You're feeling like, I need to, add a lot of extensions, and then I can come and simplify things for you. Sometimes you don't have an answer. How do we do null hypothesis significance testing with a null hypothesis? Like, how do we address this? And then I can provide you with some answers. And then I can also go over the things that you do and give you some feedback. So first, team. Second, having an instructor to share, go around and consult with. I wish you would take more advantage of this. So thinking forward, the next time you do hackathon, really take advantage of the opportunity to have somebody with experience to guide you through something. So communicating where you're stuck, communicating what it is that you don't know is very important for you to be able to learn. Okay. And then I think it's very important that you're facing challenges that are a little bit different from what you typically do. So here, we saw there are a lot of things that come into play with a very simple research question. It's just about how do people change their donations based on the number of birds. But if you'll go through the Google Doc and you'll see what each team did, it's a very, very different direction. It's a very different way of conceptualizing this. Who did the best? We don't know. Which one answers the research question? Maybe all. So who says that this one article that tested this a certain way is the right way to do this? Nobody. The number one thing that I want you to take away from all of this is that coming up, even when you have a research question, coming up with your own design is very, very complicated. There's so many unknowns. There's so many things that we need to take into consideration. Even if we think we know the IV and the DV, there's so many ways to conceptualize that. How do we test this, right? That's why it's very good to start with a replication. Just follow what the original did and base yourself on that. Before we go to a replication, I wanted you to experience what it means to have to tackle with the research question by yourself. So many unknowns, takes so much time, so much uncertainty. Did we do this correctly, not correctly? Are we going to get rejected from Nature and Science because we didn't do this? We did do that? We don't know. Is our team experienced enough? Does this PI instructor know what he's doing? Who knows? But when we start from a replication, it is published. It is done. It has 2,000, 3,000 citations. Therefore, we know that the public, the community, has embraced this as something solid. So if we build from that, we take away all the uncertainty that you just felt. Therefore, sometimes it's much easier. Just go, start from something that is already solid and is there, and then add your extensions. So compare the experience that you had today to the experience that you had last week, right? It's so much easier because you had a design. You just needed to add another control, another DV, much easier to work on that. Now you need to start from scratch and try to define everything. And that takes more time, that has more uncertainty, right? So the next step that we're going to do, which is going to come up in one of the next sessions, is we're going to try and get as close as possible to the original design. We've done extensions, that's done. We've done our own research design, done. Now we're going to move on to just following our application. And then you'll have another thing to compare. Which one is the hardest? Which one gives me more control? Which one I can learn from the most? Right? But I do want you, I know it's very easy to just like leave the classroom, go home, forget about this whole thing. But I want you to really think about what you experienced here, because there's so many things for you to learn from this. I saw you contemplating, debating, going through things. There's a lot of things that you can do for your own research thesis, for your own research directions, for your own careers, right? So really take this experience in order to try and gain something. If you want to talk about anything that happened today, if you want to contemplate your studies or your research, how to practice things, therapy, then come and talk to me. The reason why we're doing all this is to give you skills and get you to think about what it means to do research. Okay, so I hope we did a little bit of that. I'll go through your Google Docs. Don't worry about that. I just have one request, one final request. Whoever did the call checks, whatever status it's in, don't worry if it's not completed. Export the call checks to QSF file and send it to me to the email that's in the Google Doc, okay? So that's the only thing I'm asking you to do. Export the QSF file, send it to my email, and I'll go over the Google Docs and I'll go over your Qualtrics. And then we'll pick it up again next week. Any final questions, things that you want to talk about? All good? Yeah? Okay. Thank you for taking part in yet another hackathon. I had a good time, learned a lot. Hope you did as well. See you next week.